The screaming started at midnight and didn't stop until dawn. That's the detail they never include in the vampire stories. Not the supernatural seduction or the mysterious castles shrouded in fog. Just the screaming. Human screaming. 324 voices crying out in agony that would last for days, echoing off stone walls, carrying across the Wallachian countryside, reaching villages miles away where people locked their doors and prayed to saints whose names they'd almost forgotten. This wasn't Transylvania. This wasn't Bram Stoker's Gothic fantasy. This was Targovist, April 14th, 1459, and the man orchestrating this symphony of suffering wasn't a supernatural creature of the night. He was something far more terrifying. He was a prince who'd done the math. His name was Vlad III, though history would remember him by his father's epithet, Dracula, son of the dragon, or, depending on who you asked, son of the devil. Both interpretations worked. Both were, in their own way, accurate. And on this particular night, he was hosting a dinner party that would redefine the meaning of diplomatic relations for the next 5 centuries. I need you to understand something before we go further. What you're about to read isn't folklore. It's not legend embellished over time or myth twisted into entertainment. This actually happened. We have Ottoman court records. We have testimony from a Greek merchant named Demetrios Kanakazinos who witnessed everything and managed to survive. We have diplomatic correspondence from Constantinople expressing shock, horror, and something the Ottoman Empire rarely admitted, fear. The Ottomans, who'd conquered Constantinople 6 years earlier, who commanded armies that stretched from Budapest to Baghdad, who'd systematically absorbed every Christian kingdom that stood in their way, were genuinely terrified of one man ruling a principality smaller than modern-day Maryland. Want to know why? Let me tell you about the dinner party. But first, you need to understand the impossible situation Vlad was in. Picture yourself as the ruler of a small country wedged between 2 superpowers who hate each other. To your west, the Kingdom of Hungary, Catholic, wary, politically unstable. To your south and east, the Ottoman Empire, Islamic, expansionist, militarily dominant. Your country, Wallachia, exists only because these 2 giants haven't decided it's worth the trouble to fight over you yet. Every previous prince has played the same game. Pay tribute to the Ottomans, accept Hungarian protection, balance between them, survive by being useful but not threatening. It's worked, more or less, for half a century. Wallachia endures by being small, quiet, and compliant. Now imagine you're 30 years old. You've already been deposed once, spent years in exile, fought your way back to power through a combination of Hungarian backing and pure ruthlessness. You've executed rivals, purged the nobility, centralized control. You've made yourself the strongest Wallachian prince in generations. And you've just received a message from Sultan Mehmed II. The message is simple, standard even. Wallachia owes its annual tribute. 10,000 gold ducats. 500 young boys for the Janissary Corps. Acknowledgement of Ottoman supremacy. The same demands made of every tributary state. The same terms accepted by every prince who wanted to keep his throne. Except you've been thinking. You've been calculating. You've been studying the map, analyzing force distributions, measuring supply lines, evaluating strategic vulnerabilities. And you've reached a conclusion that would seem insane to anyone else. You're going to refuse. Not just refuse. You're going to refuse in such a spectacular, horrifying, unforgettable way that the Sultan himself will lose sleep. You're going to transform a routine diplomatic exchange into a declaration of war so visceral, so shocking, so utterly beyond the bounds of civilized conduct that it will echo through centuries. You're going to invite the Ottoman envoys to dinner, and they're never going to leave. This is the story of that dinner, of what happened in those castle halls when diplomacy died and legend was born, of the night Vlad Dracula looked at the most powerful empire in the world and said, with actions more eloquent than any words, "Come and take it, if you dare." But I'm warning you now. This isn't an adventure story. This isn't a tale of heroic resistance or noble sacrifice. This is a story about what happens when a man decides that survival requires becoming a monster, when strategy demands atrocity, when the only way to save your people is to do things so terrible that your enemies would rather negotiate than conquer. This is the story of how Dracula was made, not by supernatural curse or demonic pact, but by cold calculation, strategic genius, and a willingness to cross every moral line that civilized men draw. The screaming started at midnight. Let me show you why. The Ottoman envoys didn't know they were dead men when they rode through the gates of Targovist. How could they? They were professionals, career diplomats who'd negotiated with dozens of Christian princes, who understood the careful dance of power and submission that kept the Ottoman system functioning. They'd done this journey before, delivered these demands before, received tribute and obedience before. They expected this time to be the same. Hamza Pasha, the senior envoy, was 53 years old. He'd served 3 different sultans, survived court intrigues that had killed clever men, and developed an instinct for danger that had kept him alive through 2 decades of navigating the deadliest political environment in the world. He could read a room, assess threats, identify when a prince was planning something foolish. But he didn't see this coming. None of them did. His colleague, Catalaz, was younger, only 35, still ambitious, still believing that diplomatic skill and Ottoman backing were enough to handle any situation. He'd been to Wallachia twice before, had met Vlad during his first reign, had found him calculating but reasonable. Difficult, yes. Prideful, certainly. But ultimately pragmatic, ultimately willing to work within the system. That was 3 years ago. Vlad had changed. They rode into the courtyard on a gray March morning, their escort of 20 Ottoman cavalry, making enough noise to announce their arrival properly. This was standard diplomatic theater. The impressive entry, the display of Ottoman power, the subtle reminder that behind these negotiators stood the largest army in Europe. Vlad met them at the castle entrance personally. Also standard, the prince showing respect to the Sultan's representatives, acknowledging the hierarchy, demonstrating appropriate deference. Except Vlad wasn't showing deference. He was studying them, like a physician examines a patient, like a butcher evaluates livestock, like a predator calculates the best angle of attack. "Welcome to Wallachia," Vlad said in flawless Ottoman Turkish, the language he'd learned during his childhood captivity in Anatolia. "I trust your journey was pleasant." "Long but uneventful, Voivode," Hamza Pasha replied, using Vlad's Slavic title. "We bring greetings from Sultan Mehmed, conqueror of Constantinople, shadow of God on earth, protector of the faithful." "How impressive," Vlad said, and there was something in his tone, something that made Hamza's diplomatic instincts twitch. Not quite mockery, not quite sarcasm, but something off, something that didn't fit the expected script. "So many titles. I have only one, Prince of Wallachia, but I try to make it meaningful." They were escorted into the great hall, offered wine and refreshments, given rooms to rest after their journey. Everything correct, everything proper, everything following diplomatic protocol. And yet, Hamza noticed things. Small details that accumulated into unease. The castle guards weren't just numerous. They were positioned. Strategic points covered, sight lines calculated, exits controlled. This wasn't ceremonial security. This was a military operation waiting to begin. The servants moved with unusual nervousness, avoiding eye contact, completing their tasks with the speed of people who wanted to be elsewhere. And Vlad himself never stopped watching them. Even during casual conversation, even while discussing weather and road conditions and other diplomatic small talk, his pale eyes tracked every movement, every gesture, every word. "The Sultan's message?" Vlad prompted after they'd settled. Hamza produced the formal document, sealed with the Sultan's personal signet. He'd delivered hundreds of these, knew the ritual by heart. The prince would read it, express some mild reluctance about the tribute amount, negotiate minor details, ultimately accept. Standard procedure. Vlad read it slowly, his expression revealing nothing. Then he set it aside. 10,000 ducats. 500 boys. Annual submission to Ottoman authority. He recited the terms without emotion. The same demands as always. The same generous terms, Catalaz corrected gently. The Sultan could simply annex Wallachia, govern it directly, extract far more in taxes and conscription. Instead, he offers autonomy, freedom to worship as Christians, internal self-governance. These are considerable privileges. Privileges, Vlad repeated, tasting the word. Interesting choice. I had thought they were rights. The rights of a sovereign prince ruling his own people. But you call them privileges. Gifts from the Sultan that he could revoke at any time. Voivode, Hamza said carefully, his unease growing. Perhaps we should discuss this more formally. Tomorrow, perhaps, after you've had time to consider the Sultan's offer. Oh, I've been considering it, Vlad said. I've been considering it for months. In fact, I've reached a decision. But I'd like to share that decision with more than just you two. I'd like to make it a public statement, something memorable, something that will be discussed in Constantinople for years to come. What are you suggesting? Catalaz asked. Vlad smiled. It was not a comforting expression. A dinner. A feast. I'll invite everyone relevant to this discussion. Ottoman merchants operating in Wallachia. Local boyars who've argued for accommodation with the Sultan. Foreign traders who facilitate relations with Constantinople. Everyone who has opinions about Wallachia's relationship with the Ottoman Empire. He stood, signaling the end of the audience. 3 weeks from today, April 14th. I'll give you my answer then, in front of everyone, in a way that leaves no room for misunderstanding. Will you honor me with your presence? Hamza Pasha wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed danger, but diplomatic protocol demanded acceptance. Refusing a prince's hospitality was itself an insult, a diplomatic incident. And they'd come to negotiate, not to provoke confrontation. We would be honored, he heard himself say. Excellent, Vlad said. I promise you, it will be a dinner no one forgets. He wasn't lying. They just didn't understand, not yet, exactly what he meant. As the envoys left the great hall, as they were escorted to their quarters, Hamza turned to his colleague. We need to send a message to Constantinople, he whispered. Something about this feels wrong. You're being paranoid, Catalaz replied. He's just a minor prince trying to feel important. We've dealt with worse. Have we? Hamza asked. Have we ever dealt with someone who looked at us the way he does? Like we're already dead, and he's just waiting for us to realize it. Catalaz laughed nervously. Now you're being dramatic. What's he going to do? Kill Ottoman envoys? That would be declaring war. Suicide. He's not that stupid. Hamza Pasha stared out the window at the Wallachian countryside, at the small principality wedged between empires, at the land Vlad was willing to die defending. I don't think he's stupid at all, he said quietly. I think that's what terrifies me. 3 weeks later, he would be proven right. And by then, it would be far too late. While the Ottoman envoys waited in Targovist, sending optimistic reports back to Constantinople about productive negotiations, Vlad was orchestrating something unprecedented. He wasn't preparing a dinner. He was preparing a massacre with perfect choreography. In a chamber deep within the castle, away from diplomatic eyes, Vlad met with his inner circle. These weren't the public boyars who attended court functions and pretended to have influence. These were the men who actually ran Wallachia. His captain of the guard, his spymaster, his chief executioner, and a Hungarian military engineer named Johannes, who defected after teaching Vlad everything he knew about siege warfare and, more relevantly, efficient methods of execution. The guest list, Vlad said, spreading a document across the table. It wasn't organized alphabetically or by rank. It was organized by category of treason. Ottoman merchants who've enriched themselves facilitating tribute payments, 47 names. Wallachian boyars who've publicly argued for submission to the Sultan, 32 names. Greek and Armenian intermediaries who carry messages between here and Constantinople, 21 names. German traders from Brasov who've complained to the Hungarian king about my restrictions on Ottoman commerce, 18 names. He continued through the list, each category representing a different facet of the system that kept Wallachia subservient to Constantinople. By the time he finished, the total reached 324. Plus the 2 envoys, his captain added. 326 total. No, Vlad corrected. 1 envoy stays, 1 envoy goes. 325 die. 1 survives to tell the story. That's essential. If everyone dies, the message dies with them. But if 1 person survives, sees everything, carries the tale back to Constantinople with every detail intact, then the story spreads exactly as I need it to. Johannes, the engineer, studied the number with professional interest. 325 executions in a single night. That's ambitious. Even with preparation, the logistics are complex. You're talking about managing crowd control, preventing escape attempts, maintaining order while conducting mass killings. It's essentially a military operation. Exactly, Vlad said. which is why we're planning it like one. He unrolled architectural drawings of the castle's great hall, the courtyard, the surrounding grounds. Every entrance marked, every exit identified, every sight line calculated. The guests arrive at sunset, enter through the main gate. Guards here, and here to funnel them into the great hall. Once everyone's inside, we seal the exterior doors. Not obviously, not dramatically, just quietly bar them from the outside. Anyone paying attention might notice, but in the context of a feast, security at the doors seems reasonable. His spymaster pointed to the courtyard, and the stakes, already being prepared. Johannes has designed a system that allows for rapid deployment. We preposition everything, keep it covered, bring it out once the hall is secured. The actual impalement process, done efficiently with trained executioners, takes approximately 3 minutes per person. With 6 execution teams working simultaneously, we can process the entire group in under 3 hours. The men around the table absorbed this. Vlad was discussing mass murder with the systematic precision of a quartermaster planning supply distribution. Questions? Vlad asked. His captain raised a hand. The envoys. When do we separate them? When do we tell them one lives and one dies? After everyone else is processed. I want them to watch. I want them to understand completely what's happening and why. Then at the end I give them the choice. They decide between themselves who carries the message to Constantinople and who becomes part of it. That's cruel, someone muttered. That's strategic, Vlad corrected. The survivor will be traumatized, broken, haunted by guilt at being chosen to live while his colleague died. When he tells this story, and he will tell it compulsively for the rest of his life, that trauma will be in every word. The Sultan won't just hear about an atrocity. He'll feel it, through the broken man describing it. Johannes nodded slowly, understanding the psychological warfare at play. You're not just killing people. You're creating a story, a legend, something so horrifying it takes on a life of its own. Now you understand, Vlad said. The executions are just the beginning. The real weapon is the tale those executions generate. When Ottoman soldiers hear this story, when they're ordered to march into Wallachia, they won't just be fighting an army. They'll be fighting their own fear of what Dracula might do to them if they're captured. He stood, looking at each man in turn. I'm asking you to help me do something that history will call monstrous. Something that will stain all our souls. But I'm also trying to save Wallachia from slow absorption into an empire that will erase our identity, conscript our children, and reduce us to a footnote in Ottoman administrative records. The choice is between being monsters for one night or being forgotten forever. When you put it that way, his captain said quietly, I suppose we're already damned. Might as well make it count. Good man, Vlad said. Now let's review the timeline one more time. I want this executed perfectly. No improvisation, no confusion, no mercy. We do this right, or we don't do it at all. They worked through the night, refining the plan, anticipating problems, preparing contingencies. By dawn, every detail was mapped, every responsibility assigned, every potential complication addressed. Vlad dismissed his counsel and stood alone in the planning room, staring at the drawings, the lists, the calculations. What he was about to do would define him forever, would transform him from a prince into a legend, from a man into a monster, from Vlad into Dracula. But somewhere in the cold mathematics of his decision, he'd found a strange peace. He wasn't doing this for glory or power or personal satisfaction. He was doing it because all other options led to Wallachia's destruction. This was the narrow path between submission and annihilation. The terrible choice that leadership sometimes demanded. He thought about his father, Vlad II Dracula, who'd tried to balance between empires and been killed for his trouble. He thought about his brother Radu, who'd chosen the Ottoman side and now served the Sultan faithfully. He thought about his childhood years as a hostage in Anatolia, powerless, humiliated, dreaming of the day he'd be strong enough to take revenge. All of it had led here, to this moment, to this decision, to this dinner that would change everything. 3 weeks, he said to the empty room. 3 weeks until they understand what it means to push Dracula too far. Outside, dawn was breaking over Wallachia. In Constantinople, the Sultan was planning his next conquests. In the castle's guest quarters, 2 Ottoman envoys were sleeping peacefully, still believing this was routine diplomacy. And in workshops around Targovist, Carpenters were crafting stakes with very specific dimensions, following very precise instructions, creating the instruments of a legend. The countdown had begun. The 3 weeks passed with agonizing normalcy. Vlad maintained perfect diplomatic courtesy with the envoys. He showed them Wallachian fortifications, discussed trade arrangements, even negotiated minor details of the tribute as if he might actually pay it. He was acting, giving a performance so convincing that Catalaz began to relax, began to believe that Hamza's earlier paranoia had been unjustified. But Hamza Pasha couldn't shake his unease. He watched Vlad too closely, noticed too many details that didn't fit. The way Vlad's eyes went distant during conversations, as if calculating something complex while maintaining social pleasantries. The way he asked seemingly innocent questions about Ottoman military deployment, supply routes, command structure. The way he kept returning to topics of fear, reputation, psychological warfare, like a musician obsessively practicing the same difficult passage. He's planning something, Hamza told Catalaz one evening, a week before the scheduled dinner. I don't know what, but something is coming. You're seeing phantoms, Catalaz replied. He's just a prince trying to feel important before accepting reality. Let him have his moment. We get the tribute, the Sultan gets compliance, everyone wins. Do you remember the story about the fox and the rabbit? Hamza asked. What? Old Anatolian fable. A fox corners a rabbit, is about to kill it, when the rabbit says, "Wait, I'll show you where 10 other rabbits are hiding." The fox, greedy, agrees. The rabbit leads him into a cave where a wolf is sleeping. The rabbit escapes, the fox gets eaten by the wolf. What's your point? My point is that sometimes, when someone offers you something that seems too good to be true, when they invite you deeper into their territory, when they're cooperative in ways that don't quite make sense, you're not the predator. You're being led into the cave. Catalaz laughed, but it sounded forced. Now you're just telling yourself scary stories. This is Wallachia, not some fable. Vlad is not a wolf, he's a prince of a minor principality who needs Ottoman protection. He'll complain, he'll posture, he'll try to reduce the tribute amount by 1,000 ducats, and then he'll pay. That's how this works. That's how it's always worked. But that night, Hamza wrote a letter to Constantinople. He never sent it, events would overtake him before a messenger could depart. But the letter was found later in his belongings after everything that happened. It read, "To the Grand Vizier, from Hamza Pasha, envoy to Wallachia. I fear I have made a grave error in judgment. Prince Vlad has invited us to a feast, and I have accepted out of diplomatic necessity. But something in his manner suggests this invitation carries meanings I do not fully understand. He speaks of the Sultan with respect, but underneath I detect something else. Not hatred, not defiance, but something colder. Calculation. As if he's measuring the distance between our empires and finding it less impossible than it should be. I have served 3 sultans and negotiated with countless Christian princes. I know the difference between genuine submission and performance. Vlad is performing. But for whom? For us? Or for his own people? Is he demonstrating compliance to satisfy us? Or is he demonstrating something else entirely? I believe we are in danger. Not immediate physical danger. He would not dare harm Ottoman envoys, but strategic danger. Whatever happens at this dinner, whatever decision he announces, I suspect it will not be the routine acceptance we anticipate. If you do not hear from me within a month, assume the worst. Send no more diplomats to Wallachia. Send only soldiers. Written this 7th day of April, 1459, in Targovist Castle, Wallachia, with growing apprehension." He folded the letter, sealed it, placed it in his diplomatic pouch for later delivery. He never got the chance. 7 days later, the dinner would begin. The guests began arriving at noon, well before the feast was scheduled to start. This was deliberate on Vlad's part. He wanted them in the castle early, wanted them comfortable, wanted them to let their guard down before the trap closed. They came in groups, by profession and nationality. The Ottoman merchants arrived first, dressed in expensive silks, displaying the wealth they'd accumulated facilitating the tribute system. They were confident, secure in their Ottoman connections, certain that their economic importance made them untouchable. The Wallachian boyars came next, the noble families who'd argued for accommodation with the Sultan. They saw themselves as pragmatists, realists who understood that survival meant submission. They expected tonight to validate their position, to demonstrate that Vlad had finally accepted their wisdom. Greek and Armenian traders followed, the middlemen who carried messages and negotiated deals between Christian and Muslim worlds. They were professional diplomats in all but name, skilled at navigating between empires, fluent in multiple languages and customs. Finally, the German merchants from Brasov, representatives of the Transylvanian Saxon community, who'd complained to the Hungarian king about Vlad's harsh restrictions on Ottoman trade. They came reluctantly, annoyed at being summoned, but curious about what the Wallachian prince wanted to announce. By late afternoon, 324 guests filled the castle's halls and courtyards, drinking Vlad's wine, eating his bread, engaging in the social networking that accompanied any major diplomatic gathering. They were relaxed, comfortable, expecting a feast followed by Vlad's formal acceptance of Ottoman tribute demands. None of them noticed the soldiers quietly taking positions at every exit. None of them saw the covered items being arranged in the courtyard, concealed under canvas tarps. None of them paid attention to the servants who moved through the crowds with unusual nervousness, offering refreshments with shaking hands. Hamza Pasha noticed. He stood in the great hall, watching the gathering crowd, and felt his apprehension crystallize into certainty. "We need to leave," he told Catalaz urgently. "Right now, before the feast begins." "Don't be absurd," Catalaz replied. "We're the guests of honor, diplomatic representatives of the Sultan. We can't just leave." "Look around," Hamza hissed. "Really look. Count the soldiers. Watch their positioning. Notice how every exit is covered. This isn't security for a feast. This is preparation for something else." Catalaz started to argue, then paused, actually observing what Hamza was describing. His expression changed as understanding dawned. "Oh God," he whispered. "You're right. This is a trap. We need to." But it was too late. The drums began, deep, rhythmic, calling everyone to the great hall for the feast. The crowd moved naturally in that direction, flowing through the wide doors, taking seats at the long tables that had been prepared. Hamza and Catalaz tried to move against the flow, to edge toward a side exit, but guards politely but firmly directed them toward the head table. "The voivode requests your presence beside him," a captain said, smiling. "Places of honor for the Sultan's representatives." They had no choice. To refuse would create an incident, would reveal that they'd identified the trap. So they went, moving like condemned men to the execution platform, taking their seats at the head table where Vlad waited. He was dressed simply, no elaborate robes or crowns, just dark clothing that would hide blood stains effectively. Another detail that Hamza noticed with mounting horror. "My honored guests," Vlad said, his voice carrying to every corner of the now-packed Great Hall. "Welcome. Tonight, we celebrate a decision. Tonight, Wallachia chooses its future. Tonight, we answer the eternal question that has plagued us for generations. How do we survive between empires?" The crowd murmured approvingly, expecting a speech about pragmatism and accommodation. Vlad smiled. "But first, let us eat. Please enjoy the feast. I've prepared something very special for all of you." Servants began bringing out food, course after course, each more elaborate than the last. The guests ate, drank, relaxed into the familiar rhythm of diplomatic feasting. And while they ate, while they let their guard down, while they focused on food and wine and conversation, the soldiers moved. Quietly, efficiently, professionally, they barred every door from the outside. By the time the fourth course was served, no one in that hall could leave. The trap was closed, and Vlad stood to deliver his answer to the Ottoman Empire's demands. Vlad stood slowly, letting the silence build. The musicians stopped playing. The servants froze mid-step. 324 guests turned their attention to the head table, wine goblets halfway to lips, expecting the standard diplomatic announcement. They got something else entirely. "I want to tell you a story," Vlad began, his voice conversational, almost gentle. "When I was 11 years old, my father sent me to Anatolia as a hostage. Insurance, he called it, a guarantee of Wallachia's good behavior. The Sultan kept me for 6 years. He paused, letting his eyes travel across the hall, making contact with specific individuals. 6 years where I learned Ottoman Turkish, studied Islamic law, practiced calligraphy and poetry. 6 years where I was treated with courtesy, given tutors, allowed to live in relative comfort. 6 years where I learned exactly how the Ottoman system works. Some of the Ottoman merchants nodded approvingly. This sounded like a speech about cultural understanding, about the benefits of Ottoman civilization. But I also learned something else during those 6 years. I learned what it feels like to be powerless, to know that my life, my freedom, my future depended entirely on whether my father obeyed orders from Constantinople. I learned what it means to be a hostage, a bargaining chip, a piece in someone else's game. His voice hardened, and I swore during those 6 years that if I ever had power, if I ever ruled Wallachia, no one would ever make me feel that way again. No one would ever hold my fate in their hands. No one would ever reduce me to a calculation in their strategic planning. Hamza Pasha felt his stomach drop. This wasn't going to be a submission speech. Tonight, Vlad continued, I received the Sultan's generous offer. 10,000 ducats, 500 boys, annual acknowledgement of Ottoman supremacy, the same terms every Wallachian prince has accepted for 50 years. He picked up the Sultan's sealed letter from the table, held it up for everyone to see. And many of you have argued that I should accept these terms. You've called me reckless for hesitating, foolish for considering resistance, dangerous for putting Wallachia at risk with my pride. The boyars who'd made such arguments shifted uncomfortably in their seats. You've built your fortunes on Ottoman trade, Vlad gestured to the merchants. You've enriched yourselves facilitating our submission. You've become wealthy as intermediaries of our servitude. And you've told yourselves you're pragmatists, realists, that you're ensuring Wallachia's survival through cooperation. His voice dropped, became colder, harder. I call it treason. The word hung in the air like a blade. Suddenly the temperature in the hall seemed to plummet. Guests looked at each other nervously, uncertain where this was going. You see, I've spent the last 6 months studying a question. What is the cost of submission? Not the obvious cost, the gold and the boys we send to Constantinople, but the real cost. The cost to our identity, our independence, our soul as a people. He began pacing, his movements controlled, predatory. And I've concluded that the cost is everything. That slow absorption into the Ottoman Empire is worse than quick death in battle. That being forgotten as a footnote in Ottoman administrative records is worse than being remembered as a principality that fought and lost. That peaceful surrender is the only truly unforgivable sin a prince can commit. Catalaz stood abruptly. Voivode, I must protest. You speak of the Sultan's offer as submission, but it is protection. It is partnership. It is. It is slavery with better terminology. Vlad cut him off. And I'm done pretending otherwise. He turned to face the Ottoman envoys directly. So here is my answer to Sultan Mehmed's generous offer. No. No tribute. No boys. No acknowledgement of Ottoman supremacy. Wallachia is a sovereign principality, not an Ottoman vassal state, and I will rule it as such. The hall erupted in chaos. Shouting, protests, some guests rising from their seats. The Ottoman merchants looked horrified. The boyars looked terrified. The foreign traders looked shocked. And Hamza Pasha looked resigned, because he'd known this was coming, had felt it building, and now understood exactly what would happen next. Vlad raised his hand. The noise died instantly. Not because of respect, but because at that gesture, soldiers around the hall drew their swords. The metallic sound of 300 blades leaving their sheaths cut through the panic like a physical force. Sit down, Vlad said quietly. All of you, sit down and listen, because I'm not finished. They sat. They had no choice. The exits were sealed, the soldiers armed, the situation completely out of their control. Now, Vlad continued, his voice returning to that conversational tone, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I've gone mad, that I'm committing suicide, that the Ottoman Empire will crush me, will destroy Wallachia, will make an example so terrible that no other tributary state will ever dare to defy the Sultan again. He smiled, and there was something genuinely amused in the expression. And you're probably right. Probably. But here's what you're not considering. Here's what the Sultan isn't considering. Here's what everyone who thinks submission is the only logical choice isn't considering. He leaned forward, hands on the table, his pale eyes reflecting torchlight. Fear works both ways. The silence was absolute. 324 people holding their collective breath. The Ottoman Empire doesn't control Eastern Europe through superior numbers alone. It controls through reputation, through the belief that resistance is futile, that defiance brings only destruction, that the smart choice is always submission. That fear is what keeps tributary states paying tribute, what keeps vassal princes obedient, what keeps the entire system functioning. He straightened, spread his arms as if embracing the entire hall. So I'm going to give the Sultan something to fear. I'm going to create a reputation so terrible, a legend so horrifying, that future Ottoman commanders will think twice before marching into Wallachia. I'm going to demonstrate what happens when you push a cornered wolf. And all of you, everyone in this hall, you're going to help me deliver that message. One of the German merchants found his voice. What are you saying? What are you planning to do? Vlad's smile vanished. I'm planning to show the Ottoman Empire what terror really means. I'm planning to create a story so shocking, so visceral, so absolutely beyond the bounds of civilized warfare that it will be told for centuries. I'm planning to turn myself into a monster so complete that the name Dracula becomes a curse that Ottoman mothers use to frighten disobedient children. He gestured to his captain. And I'm planning to start with all of you. The guards moved forward, surrounding the tables. Guests started screaming, trying to run, but there was nowhere to go. The doors were sealed. The windows too high. The soldiers too many. You've spent your lives facilitating Wallachia's submission to the Ottoman Empire, Vlad said, his voice carrying over the chaos. You've argued that accommodation is wisdom, that resistance is suicide, that survival requires servitude. He walked down from the head table, moving among the panicking guests with absolute calm. Tonight, you're going to learn that there are worse things than death in battle. There are worse fates than resisting an empire. And the worst fate of all is betraying your own people for foreign gold. He stopped in front of a group of Ottoman merchants, men who'd grown rich on Wallachian tribute. You first. Since you love the Ottoman system so much, let me give you a permanent place in the message I'm sending to Constantinople. You can spend your final hours contemplating the empire you served. The merchants tried to plead, to offer money, to promise anything. Vlad wasn't listening. He gestured to the executioners. Take them to the courtyard. Begin the preparations. And remember, precision is essential. I want them alive for days, not hours. This has to be done right. The soldiers dragged the first group toward the side doors. Their screaming echoed off stone walls, mixing with the cries of the remaining guests who now understood fully what was happening. At the head table, Hamza Pasha and Catalaz sat frozen, watching their worst fears materialize. He's actually doing it, Catalaz whispered. He's actually going to kill us all. Not all of us, Hamza said quietly, his eyes fixed on Vlad. He said the message needs to be delivered. Someone has to survive to tell the story. That's what he meant. One of us lives. One of us dies. And we're going to have to choose. Catalaz turned pale. Choose? How do we choose something like that? I don't know, Hamza admitted. But we're about to find out. In the courtyard, the canvas tarps were being pulled away, revealing what had been hidden underneath. Stakes. Hundreds of them. Each one carefully crafted, precisely measured, designed for a very specific purpose. The screaming intensified as the first merchant was positioned over a stake. The executioners worked with professional efficiency, following instructions they'd practiced, ensuring the process would be slow, agonizing, and public. Inside the great hall, Vlad returned to the head table. He picked up his wine goblet, took a long drink, and surveyed the chaos he'd unleashed with the satisfaction of a craftsman admiring his work. History will remember this night, he said to no one in particular. They'll call me a monster. They'll tell stories about Dracula's cruelty, about the forest of the impaled, about the night Wallachia drowned in blood. He turned to look at the Ottoman envoys. But they'll also remember that I fought, that I refused, that one small principality looked at the greatest empire in the world and said no. And sometimes that's worth becoming a monster. The executions continued through the night. One by one, group by group, the guests who'd come to a diplomatic dinner were taken to the courtyard and impaled. Their screams created a soundtrack that would haunt Targovist for generations, a sound that shepherds in distant hills would hear and cross themselves, whispering prayers to saints they hoped were listening. And through it all, Vlad watched, not with pleasure, not with sadism, but with the focused attention of a man who understood that details mattered, that the message had to be perfect, that this night would define everything that came after. The legend of Dracula was being written in blood and suffering, and there were still hours until dawn. By midnight, the courtyard had transformed into something from a nightmare. Rows of stakes stood upright, each bearing a victim at various stages of dying. The sight was apocalyptic, inhuman, beyond anything the witnesses could have imagined. Demetrios Kantakazinos, the Greek merchant who'd been forgotten in the chaos, hidden in a corner of the great hall where no one had noticed him, watched everything with the numb horror of a man who'd stopped being able to process what his eyes were seeing. Later, much later, he would write, "I have no adequate words for what I witnessed. Language fails when confronted with suffering on this scale, with cruelty this methodical, with death this slow and public. Men I had eaten dinner with hours earlier now hung dying on wooden stakes, their screams creating a symphony of agony that will echo in my nightmares until my own death. But what haunted me most was not the suffering itself, terrible though it was. What haunted me was Dracula's face as he orchestrated it. He showed no joy, no rage, no emotion at all. He simply moved through the courtyard like a conductor leading a symphony, ensuring each element was executed correctly, each detail perfected, each message component clearly communicated. He was not a madman reveling in torture. He was a strategist implementing a plan. And somehow, that was infinitely more terrifying. The executions proceeded with industrial efficiency. 6 teams of executioners working simultaneously, each led by a specialist who'd practiced the technique until it became routine. They worked in shifts, maintaining consistent pace, ensuring quality control. Vlad had thought of everything. He'd positioned torches to ensure visibility, had arranged the stakes in concentric circles for maximum visual impact, had even calculated viewing angles, so that anyone approaching the castle from any direction would see the full display. This wasn't random violence. This was architecture, choreography, performance art with human suffering as the medium. Around 3 in the morning, a young Wallachian boyar named Stefan managed to break free from the guards holding him. He ran toward the castle gate, screaming for help, begging for mercy, promising anything if they'd just let him live. He almost made it, almost reached the gate before soldiers caught him, dragged him back struggling and crying. Vlad walked over personally, looked down at the terrified young man. "You argued for Ottoman submission in the council last month," Vlad said factually. "You told me that resistance was madness, that accommodation was wisdom, that Wallachhia's survival depended on accepting Ottoman dominance." "I was wrong," Stefan screamed. "I was wrong, please, I'll say anything you want, I'll support you, I'll fight for Wallachia, just please." "I'm sure you would," Vlad said gently. "Now, when it's too late, when you've seen the consequences of your earlier position. But last month, when your voice might have mattered, when you could have stood with me against the Ottoman system, you chose the easy path. You chose safety over sovereignty." He gestured to the executioners. "I'm showing you what safety actually costs. I'm showing everyone what happens when we choose comfortable slavery over dangerous freedom. Your death will teach others. That's something, at least. Some meaning to your suffering." Stefan was dragged away, still screaming, still begging. Vlad watched him go with that same expression of focused calculation, then returned to his oversight of the operation. Back in the great hall, only about 50 guests remained, waiting their turn, watching through the windows as their companions died. The Ottoman envoys sat at the head table, still under guard, forced to witness everything. Catalaz had broken down completely, weeping uncontrollably, muttering prayers in Turkish. But Hamza Pasha sat rigid, his face stone, refusing to give Vlad the satisfaction of seeing him fall apart. Instead, he was thinking, analyzing, trying to understand the strategic logic underneath the horror. Because despite everything, despite the atrocity unfolding around him, Hamza remained a professional. And professionals try to understand their opponents, even in the face of death. "He's not crazy," Hamza said suddenly, speaking to Catalaz but really organizing his own thoughts. "This isn't madness. Look at the pattern. Look at who he's killing, and in what order. What does it matter?" Catalaz sobbed. "We're all going to die. It matters because understanding him might save us," Hamza insisted. "Or at least save one of us. Listen." He started with the Ottoman merchants, the most visible symbols of the tribute system. Then the Wallachian boyars who argued for accommodation, eliminating internal opposition. Then the foreign intermediaries, cutting communication channels. He's systematically dismantling the entire infrastructure of Ottoman influence in Wallachia. So this isn't rage. This is policy. Cold, calculated policy implemented through terror. And that means he's rational. Which means he can be negotiated with. Which means nothing. Catalaz shouted. Look around you. This is hell, not a negotiation. No, a voice said behind them. Vlad had approached silently, listening to their conversation. Your colleague is right. This is exactly a negotiation. The most effective negotiation possible. He sat down across from them, completely at ease, as if they were discussing trade agreements instead of mass murder. I'm negotiating with the Sultan through demonstration. I'm showing him what it will cost to conquer Wallachia. Not in terms of battles or casualties or gold, but in terms of reputation, fear, psychological damage to his army. I'm teaching him that some prizes are too expensive even if you can afford them. Hamza met his eyes. You're gambling that the Sultan values his soldiers' morale more than he values Wallachian submission. Exactly, Vlad said, impressed. See, you do understand. The Sultan can send 90,000 men into Wallachia. He can burn every village, occupy every fortress. But if his soldiers are terrified, if they're seeing nightmares about forests of the impaled, if they're constantly afraid that capture means days of agony on a stake, then discipline breaks down. Desertion increases. Morale collapses. So you're trying to break his army before it even arrives, Hamza said slowly. Through reputation, through legend, through stories so horrifying that they become their own form of defense. Vlad leaned forward. And you're going to help me. One of you, at least. One of you will carry this story back to Constantinople. You'll stand before the Sultan and describe everything you've seen tonight. Every detail, every scream, every stake. You'll make him see it, hear it, smell it. And the other? Catalaz whispered. Vlad gestured toward the courtyard, where the forest of stakes continued to grow. The other becomes part of the message. A personal touch. The Sultan's own envoy, displayed prominently, demonstrating that even diplomatic immunity means nothing to Dracula. That Ottoman authority doesn't extend into these mountains. That Wallachia is no longer playing by Constantinople's rules. He stood. You have until dawn to decide between yourselves. Discuss it. Argue it. Flip a coin if you must. But when the sun rises, I want an answer. Who lives, who dies? Who carries my message, who becomes it? Then he walked away, leaving them alone with their impossible choice and the sounds of dying men echoing through stone walls. He's given us agency, Hamza said quietly after a moment. That's part of the message too. We choose our fates, just like he's choosing his. Just like he's forcing everyone to choose between submission and resistance. I don't want to choose, Catalaz said. I don't want this responsibility. Neither do I, Hamza admitted. But that's not an option we have. They sat in silence as the night wore on, as the executions continued, as the forest of stakes grew denser and more terrible. Two men, two career diplomats who'd served the Ottoman Empire faithfully for decades, now forced to decide which of them would live to report the empire's greatest humiliation. Outside, dawn was approaching, and with it, the moment when they'd have to give Vlad his answer. The longest night of their lives was almost over, but its consequences would echo for centuries. As dawn began to paint the eastern sky a pale gray, Hamza Pasha and Catalaz sat across from each other in the great hall, surrounded by empty tables still littered with the remains of the feast. The screaming outside had diminished, not because the dying had ended, but because many of the impaled had finally lost the strength to cry out. They'd been talking for hours, circling the same impossible decision, each trying to convince the other to be the survivor. I'm older, Hamza said for perhaps the 20th time. I've lived a full life. I have grandchildren. I've seen Constantinople's golden age, served under 3 sultans, traveled from Baghdad to Budapest. My story is mostly written. Yours is still unfolding. That's exactly why it should be me, Catalaz countered. You have family who love you, who need you. Your grandchildren will remember you with joy. I have no one. I'm unmarried, no children, no one whose life will be destroyed by my death. The mathematics are simple. My death costs less. Except I'm asking you to carry a burden far heavier than death, Hamza said quietly. You think surviving this will be a gift? You'll spend the rest of your life haunted by what you've seen. You'll wake screaming from nightmares. You'll see Hamza Pasha's face every time you close your eyes. You'll carry the guilt of being chosen, of living while others died. Then let me carry it, Catalaz said. Let me be the one who remembers. Someone has to testify to what happened here. Someone has to make sure the Sultan understands that this wasn't random violence, that there was strategy behind the horror, that Dracula knew exactly what he was doing. They fell silent again, each contemplating arguments that had no good answers. Finally, as the first rays of sunlight touched the castle walls, Hamza spoke again, his voice different now, reflective, almost philosophical. You know what I keep thinking about? That story Dracula told at the beginning of the feast. About his childhood as a hostage in Anatolia. About learning what it feels like to be powerless. What about it? I was part of that system. Not directly, not personally, but I represented it. I spent my career convincing tributary princes that Ottoman dominance was inevitable, that submission was the only rational choice, that resistance was suicide. I helped build the structure that created Dracula's childhood trauma. Hamza gestured toward the courtyard, where the forest of stakes stood in the growing light. And now I'm seeing the consequences. This is what we created. Not just tonight, not just these deaths, but the rage that made them possible. We built an empire on the assumption that people would accept subjugation indefinitely, that fear would keep them compliant forever. And we were wrong. You're saying we deserve this? Catalaz asked, shocked. I'm saying there's a terrible logic to it. Cause and effect. Action and reaction. The empire takes hostages, imposes tribute, conscripts children, and assumes this can continue forever. But hostages grow up. Prisoners remember. And sometimes they grow up angry enough to do something like this. He looked directly at his colleague. If you survive, if you carry this story back to Constantinople, you need to make the Sultan understand something beyond just the horror. You need to make him understand that this is a symptom of a larger problem. That you can't build an empire on subjugation and expect the subjugated to stay passive forever. That every hostage you take is a potential Dracula waiting to happen. The Sultan won't want to hear that, Catalaz said. No, he won't. But it needs to be said. And you're younger, angrier, less invested in the system. You have the courage to speak truth to power in ways I never did. That's why you need to be the one who survives. Before Catalaz could respond, footsteps echoed through the hall. Vlad approached, flanked by guards, his clothing stained with blood from his night of oversight. He looked exhausted but focused, a general who'd successfully completed a complex operation. Gentlemen, he said, dawn has arrived. Have you reached a decision? Hamza stood, his body rigid with the dignity he'd maintained throughout the ordeal. I volunteer to stay. Catalaz returns to Constantinople. No, Catalaz began to protest. This is my decision, Hamza cut him off. My choice. You will respect it. Vlad studied them both with those pale, calculating eyes. You're certain? I am, Hamza said firmly. Very well. Vlad gestured to his guards. Escort Catalaz to the stables. Give him provisions for the journey, a fresh horse, and this. He handed Catalaz a sealed letter bearing the Wallachian coat of arms, and a detailed map showing the layout of the courtyard, the positioning of every stake, the organization of the entire display. Show this to the Sultan, Vlad said. Let him see that this wasn't madness or random cruelty. Every element was planned, measured, designed for maximum psychological impact. I want him to understand that I'm not a mindless barbarian lashing out in rage. I'm a rational actor using terror as a strategic weapon. The difference matters. Catalaz took the documents with shaking hands. He turned to Hamza, eyes filled with tears. I don't want to leave you. There has to be another way. There isn't, Hamza said gently. He embraced his colleague briefly. Tell my family I thought of them at the end. Tell the Sultan that his empire pushed too hard, demanded too much. And tell everyone who'll listen that Vlad Dracula is not mad. He's methodical, and that makes him far more dangerous than any ordinary enemy. He pulled back, looked at Catalaz with intensity. Remember everything, every detail. Don't sanitize it or soften it when you report. The Sultan needs to feel this, not just hear about it. Make him understand what his soldiers will face if they march into Wallachia. Make him afraid. Catalaz nodded mutely, unable to speak. The guards led him toward the door. He looked back once, seeing Hamza standing straight and dignified beside Vlad, accepting his fate with the courage of a man who'd made his peace with death. Then he was outside, mounted on a horse, riding through the courtyard of stakes where the forest of the impaled stretched in every direction. Hundreds of bodies in various stages of death. The smell was overwhelming. The sight burned into his memory with a clarity that would never fade. And there, in the center, higher than all the others, a stake waited. The place of honor. The final message. For Hamza Pasha. Vlad led Hamza to the courtyard personally. The sun was fully up now, revealing the full extent of the night's work in merciless daylight. 324 stakes. 324 traders, collaborators, and Ottoman sympathizers. 324 messages written in human suffering. And one stake remained empty. The tallest, the most prominent, painted in Ottoman colors, positioned on an elevated platform, visible from every approach to the castle. Hamza stared at it, at his future, at the death awaiting him. He'd known it was coming, had spent hours preparing himself mentally. But seeing the actual instrument of execution, understanding precisely how the next hours and days would unfold, still required every ounce of courage he possessed. "I could make it quick," Vlad said quietly. "A sword through the heart. Painless. Instant. You've earned that much with your dignity." Hamza shook his head. "No. If I'm going to be part of your message, make me the clearest part. Let the Sultan see what happens to his representatives in Wallachia. Let every Ottoman commander understand the price of invading. Give me the death that serves your strategy." Vlad looked at him with something that might have been respect. "You're a remarkable man, Hamza Pasha. In another world, under different circumstances, we might have been allies. You have the intelligence to understand what I'm doing, even if you disapprove of it." "I do understand," Hamza said, "and I do disapprove. But I also recognize that you're probably right about the strategic effectiveness. Terror works. Fear is a weapon. And what you've created here tonight will echo through the Ottoman military for generations." He took a breath, steadying himself. "But understand something, Dracula. You're creating a legend, yes. You're building a reputation that will make armies hesitate. But you're also creating something else. You're creating a story about what humans are capable of when they believe the end justifies the means. And that story will outlive your strategic victories." "I know," Vlad said quietly. "I've accepted that cost. History will remember me as a monster. But it will also remember that I fought. That Wallachia didn't submit quietly. That's enough." "Is it?" Hamza asked. "Is being remembered as a monster really enough?" "We'll see," Vlad said. "In 500 years, in 1,000, when historians study this moment, we'll see whether the legend of Dracula serves my people or destroys them. But by then, I'll be long dead, and the choice will have been made." He gestured to the executioners. "Do you have any final words? Any message you want Catalas to carry beyond what you've already told him?" Hamza thought for a moment, then spoke clearly, knowing his words would be reported. "Tell the Sultan that I served him faithfully until the end. Tell him that I died understanding why Wallachia refused his terms, even if I disagreed with their methods. And tell him this, fear works both ways. If he comes to Wallachia seeking revenge for tonight, he'll find more than just Dracula waiting for him. He'll find a people who've seen their prince willing to become a monster to defend them. That's a powerful force, more powerful than armies." He turned to Vlad. "I'm ready. Make it count." The executioners moved forward with professional efficiency. They'd done this 324 times already tonight. They knew exactly what to do. Hamza Pasha maintained his dignity to the very end. He helped them position him, didn't struggle or cry out, kept his eyes fixed on the horizon as the stake was raised. Only when gravity began its terrible work, when pain beyond imagination started to consume him, did he finally close his eyes. But he didn't scream. Wouldn't give Vlad that satisfaction. He'd been a diplomat for 30 years, had negotiated with kings and sultans, had maintained composure through countless difficult situations. He would maintain it now, through the worst situation of all. Vlad watched until the stake was fully erected, until Hamza was positioned at the highest point of the display, until the centerpiece of his message was complete. Then he turned away, walked back into the castle, and finally, after 16 hours of orchestrating horror, allowed himself to show exhaustion. He collapsed into a chair in his private chambers, stared at his blood-stained hands, and for the first time that night, questioned whether he'd made the right choice. 325 people dead. Hundreds more who'd witnessed the executions traumatized forever. His own soul stained with crimes that no amount of strategic justification could wash clean. Was it worth it? Would it work? Or had he just condemned himself and his people to destruction, while transforming himself into the exact kind of monster he'd once sworn to oppose? He didn't know. Wouldn't know until the Sultan's response arrived, until Ottoman armies either invaded or hesitated, until history rendered its verdict. All he knew was that the choice was made, the deed was done, and there was no going back. Vlad Dracula had thrown his dinner party, and the world would never be the same. Catalaz rode hard for 3 days, barely stopping, driven by a desperate need to escape the horror he'd witnessed and a terrible obligation to report it accurately. He avoided main roads, fearing Wallachian patrols might have orders to kill him despite Vlad's promise of safe passage. He trusted nothing anymore. The journey gave him too much time to think, to remember, to relive every detail of that night. He found himself compulsively organizing the information, structuring the report he'd have to deliver, trying to find words adequate for the unspeakable. At night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the forest of stakes, heard the screaming, smelled the blood and fear and death, saw Hamza Pasha's face, dignified even in agony, dying slowly on that elevated platform. He'd survived, yes, but Hamza had been right. Survival was its own form of torture. On the 4th day, he crossed into Ottoman territory. The border guards initially didn't believe his story, thought he was mad or lying. But the documents Vlad had given him, the official letter and detailed map, convinced them. They sent him forward with military escort, rushing him toward Constantinople with the urgency reserved for critical intelligence. 6 days after leaving Targovist, Catalaz stood before Sultan Mehmed II in the throne room of Topkapi Palace, surrounded by viziers, generals, and court officials, about to deliver the report that would define the rest of his life. He was disheveled, exhausted, traumatized, but he was also a professional. He'd served the empire for 15 years. He knew how to deliver difficult information to power. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice steady despite everything. "I bring news from Wallachia. Terrible news. News that will require immediate military response." "Where is Hamza Pasha?" the Sultan asked. He was the senior envoy. "Why are you reporting alone?" "Hamza Pasha is dead, Your Majesty. Executed by Vlad Dracula, along with 324 others. Ottoman merchants, Wallachian nobles, foreign traders. Everyone who supported Ottoman interests in Wallachia. Everyone who argued for accommodation with our empire." The throne room erupted in shock and anger. The Sultan raised a hand for silence. "Explain," he commanded. "Everything. Every detail. Leave nothing out." So Catalaz told the story. From the invitation to the dinner, through the feast and Vlad's speech, through the long night of executions, to Hamza's final choice and death. He spoke for over an hour, describing everything he'd seen, every horror he'd witnessed, every element of Vlad's carefully orchestrated message. He showed them the map, pointing out how the stakes were arranged, how the display was designed for maximum visibility and psychological impact. He read them Vlad's letter, which was astonishingly direct. To Sultan Mehmed II, conqueror of Constantinople, from Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, "I have received your demand for tribute. I decline to pay it. Wallachia is not a tributary state. We are a sovereign principality, and I will rule it as such. The deaths you will hear about from my envoy are not random violence. They are deliberate policy. I have eliminated every person in Wallachia who argued for submission to your empire. I have demonstrated what happens to those who betray their own people for Ottoman gold. If you choose to invade, understand what you're choosing. You will face not just my army, but my reputation. Your soldiers will march through forests of the impaled. They will hear stories about Dracula that will invade their dreams. They will fight while terrified that capture means days of agony on a stake. You can defeat me militarily. You have the numbers, the resources, the tactical advantage. But I will make the victory so expensive, so bloody, so psychologically devastating that future sultans will think twice before sending armies into these mountains. This is not a threat. This is a promise. Come if you dare. But understand the price. Written in the blood of traitors, sealed with the screams of the damned. Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, called Dracula. The throne room was silent when Catalaz finished. Every person present understood the implications. This wasn't just a diplomatic incident. This was a direct challenge, a declaration of war, and an invitation to the bloodiest campaign the Ottoman Empire would face in decades. Sultan Mehmed II sat motionless on his throne, his face revealing nothing. He was known for his temper, for explosive rages when his will was thwarted. Everyone expected fury, demands for immediate invasion, orders to assemble the largest army the empire could field. Instead, the Sultan spoke quietly. "This Dracula, is he mad?" Catalaz hesitated, then answered truthfully. "No, Your Majesty. That's what makes him so dangerous. He's completely sane. Everything he did was calculated for strategic effect. He's using terror as a weapon, trying to make the psychological cost of conquest outweigh the strategic value. And in your professional opinion, will it work?" Another hesitation. This was dangerous ground. But Catalaz had promised Hamza he'd speak truth. "Yes, Your Majesty. I believe it will work. Not because he can defeat us militarily, but because he can make us afraid. Because fear is contagious. Because soldiers who've heard these stories will fight less effectively, desert more readily, break more easily. Because he's weaponized reputation in a way I've never seen before." The Sultan stood, walked to the window overlooking Constantinople. "You're recommending we don't invade. I'm recommending careful consideration of whether Wallachian submission is worth what it will cost to achieve, both in terms of casualties and in terms of the precedent we set. If we send 90,000 men to crush one small principality, if we commit that level of resources to what should be a minor punitive expedition, we're signaling that Dracula successfully made himself too expensive to conquer easily. We're validating his strategy." The Sultan was silent for a long moment. Then he turned back, his face hard. "Assemble the army. 90,000 men. Full campaign preparation. We invade Wallachia this summer. And we don't stop until Vlad Dracula's head is on a stake matching the one he put Hamza Pasha on." "Your Majesty, I understand your concerns, Catalaz. I understand the strategic logic. But there are some insults that cannot be ignored. Some lines that cannot be crossed without response. Dracula has declared war on the Ottoman Empire. We will answer with overwhelming force." He gestured dismissal. "You're relieved of diplomatic duties. Take time to recover from your ordeal. But I want you to accompany the army when it marches. I want you to see Dracula defeated, to watch his castle burn, to witness his execution. You've earned that much." Catalaz bowed and withdrew, knowing he'd failed. Failed to make the Sultan understand. Failed to prevent exactly the response Vlad had been trying to provoke. Failed Hamza, who died hoping his sacrifice would teach the empire something about the limits of power. The Ottoman Empire was going to war with Wallachia. And Vlad Dracula, sitting in his castle in Targovist, surrounded by his forest of the impaled, was probably smiling. Because everything was going exactly according to plan. In the 3 months between the dinner and the Sultan's invasion, Vlad didn't rest. He'd sent his message, provoked his response, and now he had to prepare for the consequences. The forest of stakes around Targovist Castle remained standing, a permanent monument to that April night. The bodies had long since stopped screaming, stopped moving, stopped being recognizably human. But Vlad ordered them left in place, ordered the stakes maintained, ordered guards to prevent anyone from removing the remains. "Let them rot where they died," he commanded. "Let every traveler see them. Let every story about that night include the detail that the forest still stands." That's part of the message. Permanence. Commitment. The willingness to live with what I've done. But he wasn't satisfied with one forest. If terror was his weapon, he needed to sharpen it, refine it, make it more effective. Ottoman scouts began entering Wallachia in May, advance reconnaissance for the coming invasion. They were good, professional soldiers who knew how to move through hostile territory undetected. But Vlad's network of informants was better. Peasants, shepherds, merchants, people who hated the Ottomans and loved their prince for his defiance. The scouts were caught. All of them. 37 men over the course of 6 weeks. And Vlad impaled them too. Not in Targovist, but along every major road leading into Wallachia. He created a network of warning signs, each one a human body on a stake, each one a message to the advancing Ottoman army. Turn back. This is what awaits you here. His own soldiers started calling him Vlad Teeps, Vlad the Impaler. The name stuck, spread, became more famous than his princely titles, and Vlad encouraged it, understanding that a nickname based on terror had more strategic value than any noble epithet. But impalement wasn't his only preparation. While the forests of stakes grew, Vlad was implementing a scorched earth strategy that would define the entire campaign. He evacuated entire regions of Wallachia, forced populations to move north into the mountains, taking everything valuable with them. Then he burned what remained: crops, villages, mills, bridges, anything the Ottoman army might use for supply or shelter. They're bringing 90,000 men, he told his war council. That's an enormous logistical burden. They need food, water, shelter, fodder for horses. If we deny them all of it, if we turn Wallachia into a desert, they'll starve before they ever reach our armies. His boyars protested. You're destroying our own country. When the Ottomans leave, what will we have left? A country, Vlad said flatly. Damaged, yes. Burned, yes. But ours. Not an Ottoman province. Not a tributary state. Ours. And we'll rebuild. But we can only rebuild if we survive, and we only survive if the Ottoman invasion fails. He pointed to a map showing Ottoman supply lines stretching from Constantinople through Bulgaria into Wallachia. They're planning a quick campaign. 2 months, maybe 3. March in, crush us, install a puppet prince, march out before winter. Standard Ottoman playbook. But if we stretch it out, if we make every mile cost them casualties and supplies, if we turn this into a grinding war of attrition, they'll break before we do. Because they're far from home and we're not. It was a brutal strategy. It would devastate Wallachia's economy, leave thousands homeless, cause starvation and suffering among his own people. But Vlad had concluded it was the only strategy that might work against an army 5 times the size of anything he could field. And so Wallachia burned. Systematically, methodically, village by village. Vlad's soldiers moved through the countryside with torches, destroying everything that might sustain an invading army. Cantacuzzinos, who'd fled to Brashov but couldn't resist documenting the ongoing horror, wrote, "I have seen war before. I have seen cities sacked, populations enslaved, cultures destroyed. But I have never seen a prince deliberately destroy his own country as preparation for defense." Vlad burns Wallachia to save it. The logic is impeccable. The cost is staggering. And the determination required to implement such a strategy reveals a mind that has moved beyond normal human calculations of cost and benefit. He is not defending a kingdom in the traditional sense. He is defending an idea. The idea that some things are worth any price. That sovereignty is worth starvation. That independence is worth devastation. That being free and destroyed is preferable to being subjugated and prosperous. I do not know if he is right, but I know he believes it with a conviction that makes compromise impossible. On June 17, 1462, 2 weeks after entering Wallachia, the Ottoman army made camp near the town of Targovist. They could see the castle in the distance, could see the original forest of stakes still standing around it, monument to the dinner that had started everything. The Sultan called a war council. His generals argued about strategy. Some wanted immediate assault, crushing Vlad before morale deteriorated further. Others wanted to wait, consolidate positions, secure supply lines before committing to battle. While they argued, Vlad was preparing his most audacious move yet. He'd assembled a force of about 10,000 men. Elite troops, his best soldiers, veterans who'd followed him through multiple campaigns. Against 90,000 Ottomans, it should have been suicide to attack. But Vlad wasn't planning a conventional battle. He was planning assassination. His intelligence network had identified the Sultan's tent position in the Ottoman camp, knew the layout, the guard rotations, the weak points in camp security. And Vlad had concluded that killing Sultan Mehmed II was worth any risk, any cost, any sacrifice. If the Sultan dies, he told his commanders, the army falls apart. Ottoman succession is always chaotic. His generals will compete for power. The campaign will collapse. We don't need to defeat 90,000 men. We just need to kill one. It was brilliant strategy. It was also nearly impossible. The Sultan's security was legendary. He traveled with elite janissaries, with multiple layers of protection, with contingency plans for every threat. But Vlad had surprise on his side, and terror. The Ottoman army was exhausted, demoralized, traumatized by weeks of marching through burned wastelands and forests of the impaled. Their guard was down. They believed Vlad was somewhere ahead of them, defending his castle, preparing for siege warfare. They didn't expect him to attack their camp directly. At midnight, in complete darkness, Vlad's 10,000 men struck. They came silently, having infiltrated through the Ottoman picket lines, having killed sentries without raising alarm. They materialized like ghosts in the heart of the camp, targeting the Sultan's position, cutting through confused defenders with focused precision. Chaos erupted. Ottoman soldiers woke to find enemies among them, fire spreading, their camp under attack from within. The janissaries defending the Sultan's tent fought desperately, but Vlad's men fought like demons, like soldiers who'd accepted death and were only trying to complete their mission before dying. Vlad himself led the assault on the Sultan's tent. He was 40 yards away when the janissaries finally created a defensive line that couldn't be breached. 40 yards from killing the Sultan, from ending the war with a single blow. But 40 yards was enough. The Sultan's guards formed a wall of shields and spears. More reinforcements arrived. The surprise was gone, the window of opportunity closing. Vlad made a command decision in seconds. They couldn't reach the Sultan. Continuing the attack meant annihilation. Time to retreat. "Fall back," he shouted. "Disengage. Back to the horses." His men obeyed with the discipline of professional soldiers. They withdrew fighting, inflicting maximum casualties, disappearing into the darkness as quickly as they'd appeared. Behind them, the Ottoman camp was in absolute chaos. Thousands of soldiers fighting in the dark, unable to distinguish friend from enemy, killing each other in the confusion. Fires spreading through tents. Wounded screaming. Officers trying to restore order and failing. And in his tent, Sultan Mehmed II sat on his field throne, shaking with rage and fear. The most powerful man in the world had nearly been killed in his own camp. Dracula had penetrated supposedly impenetrable security, had reached within 40 yards of assassination, had demonstrated that Ottoman military superiority meant nothing against an enemy willing to use unconventional tactics. The psychological damage was catastrophic. The Sultan had been shown to be vulnerable, mortal, not the invincible conqueror of Constantinople, but just a man who could be killed if someone was desperate enough, creative enough, ruthless enough. Catalaz, who'd been in the camp during the attack, who'd hidden in a supply tent while the fighting raged around him, wrote, "Tonight I understood fully what Hamza tried to tell me. What Vlad has been trying to teach the Empire. Power isn't just about numbers and resources. It's about psychology, about will, about the willingness to do anything to achieve your goals. The Sultan commands 90,000 men. Dracula commanded 10,000. The Sultan should have crushed him easily. Instead, Dracula nearly killed the Sultan in his own tent. Because Dracula was willing to gamble everything on one desperate attack, while the Sultan expected conventional warfare. We are losing this war. Not militarily. We still have overwhelming numerical superiority. But psychologically, every day in Wallachia costs us more in morale and will than we can sustain. And Dracula knows it. The Sultan knew it too. 3 days after the night attack, he gave the order to withdraw. Not retreat. He couldn't call it retreat, but strategic repositioning, consolidating gains, securing supply lines for renewed campaign. All euphemisms for the same reality. The Ottoman Empire was leaving Wallachia without achieving its objectives. Vlad Dracula had won, not through defeating the Ottoman army in battle, but through making the psychological cost of victory exceed its strategic value. Through being willing to burn his own country, impale thousands, sacrifice everything for independence. Through becoming a monster so complete that even conquering him felt like losing. The army marched back toward the Danube, moving faster than they'd come, desperate to escape this cursed land and its demon prince. Behind them, in Targovist Castle, Vlad watched them go and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He'd done it. One small principality had defied the greatest empire in the world, had forced them to withdraw, had proven that terror could defeat superior numbers. But the victory was temporary, and Vlad knew it. The Sultan would come back eventually, with a different strategy, better preparation. And Wallachia was devastated, burned, its population scattered, its economy destroyed. The price of independence had been everything, and Vlad had paid it willingly. But at what cost to his soul? At what price to his humanity? Those were questions he'd stopped asking months ago, on the night he'd invited the Ottoman envoys to dinner. The story spread faster than armies could march. From Constantinople to Rome, from Vienna to Moscow, from London to Baghdad, everyone heard about Vlad Dracula and his forest of the impaled. The details changed with each telling, growing more horrific, more supernatural, more divorced from historical reality. Vlad became a vampire who drank blood, a demon who sold his soul, a monster who killed for pleasure rather than strategy. The real story of calculated terror used as military strategy, of psychological warfare deployed with precision, of a prince willing to become a monster to save his country, got lost beneath layers of legend. But the strategic effect Vlad wanted survived intact. Future Ottoman campaigns into Wallachia were smaller, more cautious, less confident. The name Dracula became a curse that Ottoman soldiers whispered, a warning about the cost of invading those mountains. Vlad himself ruled for only a few more years. His own boyars eventually turned against him, uncomfortable with his methods, afraid of his ruthlessness. The Hungarian king imprisoned him, then released him, then supported another claimant to the Wallachian throne. In 1476, Vlad briefly regained power, but was killed in battle under circumstances that remain unclear. Some accounts say Ottoman soldiers killed him. Others say his own men turned on him. Some whisper he was assassinated by Hungarian agents. His head was cut off and sent to Constantinople, where Sultan Mehmed II, the same sultan who'd withdrawn from Wallachia 14 years earlier, had it mounted on a stake. The irony was noted by contemporary chroniclers. But death couldn't kill the legend. If anything, it freed the story to grow without the constraints of historical reality. Vlad Dracula became Dracula the vampire, the monster, the supernatural evil that would haunt literature and imagination for centuries. And in a strange way, that was exactly what Vlad had wanted. Not the supernatural part, that was later embellishment, but the legend part, the story that would outlive him, that would make future enemies afraid, that would protect Wallachia through reputation alone. He'd thrown a dinner party that changed history. 325 guests invited, 325 guests dead, one guest sent home to tell the tale. And from that night came a legend that would never die. 565 years later, we still remember, still tell the story, still feel a chill when we hear the name Dracula. Not because of the vampire fiction, but because underneath the myth, beneath the legend, behind the horror stories, there's a historical truth that's somehow more terrifying than any supernatural tale. There was a real man named Vlad. He really did invite Ottoman envoys to dinner. He really did impale hundreds of people as a strategic message. He really did use terror as a weapon with systematic precision. And it worked. That's the part that haunts us. Not the horror itself, but the cold logic behind it. Not the cruelty, but the calculation. Not the monster, but the man who chose to become one. The night Vlad Dracula invited the Ottoman envoys to dinner didn't just birth a legend. It taught the world a lesson we've been trying to unlearn ever since. That sometimes being a monster works. That terror can be an effective strategy. That there are men who can commit atrocities while remaining perfectly sane, perfectly rational, perfectly convinced they're doing the right thing. And maybe, just maybe, that's more frightening than any vampire could ever be. Because vampires aren't real. But Vlad Dracula was. And the dinner he hosted in those castle halls on April 14th, 1459, really happened. The screaming really started at midnight. And the echoes have never quite stopped.